Well,
it's important to have those elements, and I think that if you can just somehow like pass that on, uh,
no, I
I
agree
don't
with
know.
you. So one of the
Yeah,
things I want to point out here is that you always share, and so someone might be wondering, how come he just took a swig without like actually sharing? And then you put something aside for your ancestors and for the spirits. And
true,
you put
true.
that there for them so that when they come and visit you, when they come and visit you, then it's there for them. And so
Yeah, they always have
I
to have
leave it out
something.
there.
One of the old ladies a long time ago, we had this, because like back when my grandmother was still alive, all the old ladies would come over. They'd be talking to like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And one of these times when it was pretty late, my brother and I were there, and I was really young. Jay probably remembers it more, but like sometimes these old ladies would, I don't know, they get into a
They
trance
get possessed,
and
yeah.
they get possessed by the ancestors. And so I know this sounds kind of crazy, but like this old lady, she stood up and started, and literally her voice started to change a little bit. She started speaking more like a man, and apparently it was my grandmother's father, and he was saying, "How come you have not left any food for us? How come you have not left anything for us? We've come to visit, and there's nothing here." And that was like kind of freaky, man. Especially never seen that before, you know. And so ever since then, that was probably the impetus for my parents to also start making sure that we learned the culture as much as we could. And it was also the impetus for us to make sure that we reconnected with the other Igorots around. This was like
Mm.
in the '80s, I think, right, Jay? Bebop was
Yeah.
made in the '90s. Our
Well,
Bebop was made in the
BBAC, our BBAC was founded in 1990, but there was already a lot of gatherings. But this was about probably mid 80s, and I remember how the grandma spoke, and she stood up and started pointing. I'm like, oh man! And she started, her
Yeah.
voice changed, and after that, it was kind of like a wake up call, like, whoa, okay, all right, then those are things that we should pursue. Um,
I remember growing
and
up, I'd hear stories like that too, like
mm,
especially like from what I remember in the Philippines. Even when we moved here, I'd still hear my dad talk stories about that stuff, like all
Mm.
these like spiritual stuff. Like for me, I'm not very spiritual, but I understand what you mean when you talk about like um, you have to feel your ancestors because I like that's where I think where authenticity comes from, and
mhm.
obviously that's where it comes from. But if you look at it from more of a worldly, practical sense, like if you try to put yourself in, like when you actually feel the music, when you feel like you belong uh, in that
Yeah.
group, that's when you start like like I'm not very good at playing gongs or whatever, but if I were to be part of like say Bendian and everything's going fluidly, that's what that's what I feel like when I'm in the midst of my ancestors. That's how I interpret it as. But
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
find, for me, what I find interesting is like I remember back when I was younger, I'd go to my mom's house when where she grew up in Batan, and all the old
Mm.
women, specifically the old women, they do the chanting. Like an old
Mm.
man would, one of the elders would like say, um, like what's it? He'll say something, and then yeah, the old woman would reply back with like a
Oh,
chant type thing,
yes. Yes.
and that was that. Like I remember specifically experiencing that a lot when I was younger, but right
Mm.
when I came back like last year, I remember what's it called? A lot of the aunties back there they didn't want to join because they're very like they're super Christian. Like from my family, they're very
Mm,
like
Mm.
they're very Protestant Baptist. So anything
mhm.
that is like in like anything that is very what's the word uh
Pagan
basically anything
sounding?
that's pagan. Exactly, I was
Hmm.
trying to say like Igorot, but yeah, pagan, anything pagan they will not participate in. So like a lot of the
Mm.
even our history, like I barely know it, barely know anything, because especially when my parents like converted to Baptist, it's all about like God, Christian, and church,
Yeah,
which is cool,
yeah.
right? Which is why I think it's really special that Jay is part of this, because you're a priest, right? So what I would look forward to was your perspective and the differences between paganism and Christianity in the context of our Igorot culture. And because it was really interesting to me, because when we were trying to do a kanyao in Batan, where my mom's from, like,
Mm.
yeah, her relatives didn't want to come
Mm.
because they didn't want to participate in the tayao, where like they had to they had to pray first and then the butcher, like they didn't want to be part of that.
Right,
If they
right.
were gonna do the tayao, they weren't gonna come. So what happened? And because we were supposed to be doing a full blown like kanya, like uh, not kanya, but what's it called? But yeah, so it was gonna be this huge thing, but they decided to do the prayer like early and butcher the pigs early. That way, the relatives can come, and that way the aunties would feel comfortable participating in the merriment or
Mm.
whatever. So I thought that was really interesting, because like from 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 my experience, most of the older folk have become like Christianized, like anti-pagan type thing. So it's interesting how, from my perspective, it's like me and Gerald have always talked about this now, or like talked about this, how it's usually our generation that's like way more interested in this stuff. And if we do have questions,
Right,
we
right.
do talk to our aunties and uncles or mom and dads and stuff, and they'll answer the questions. Like even now, I'll ask my mom about stuff in the past, and she'll answer.
Mm.
But there's a difference with that versus things being handed down, compared to how we imagine the experience of our culture is, how things are handed down by word of mouth and stuff, right? Things are handed down. That's how our culture has preserved.
Right.
And it's interesting how our from my experience growing up, there really isn't that in that sense. So I don't know. Like for
At
me,
least not here,
spirituality is
right?
something else.
Not here.
Yeah, no, especially not here. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to know too, like learning of how our culture is growing back home, right?
Mm.
There's also that not disconnect, but there's also that parallel like experience that is different from how I grew up and how I might have grown up back home and stuff. So I've always thought
Right.
about that sort of stuff. It's kind of
Can I just say
really
something
interesting.
before you say something, Jay?
Yeah. So I
Before I
think
forget it.
I grew up. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what I think was interesting, because you were talking about like, oh, how they do it in the Philippines, and I just wanted to
Hmm.
talk about my in-laws, because my in-laws, my my father-in-law, he's the one that helps lead prayers these days, but
Hmm.
he's also like big into the Episcopal Church.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
even though he's Christian, he's still helping to lead these so-called like pagan rituals.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what from my in-laws' perspective, uh, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
They believe that blessings are blessings and prayers are prayers, and why not try to get blessings from every aspect that you can? you know, why not? We have both traditions. We can celebrate
Hmm.
both.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
So receive the blessings from both sides. And we spoke to this Hindu lady, and we were talking about they invited us to the hospital to do Christmas caroling with them. And then my wife was like, you guys sing Christmas carols? She goes, of course we do. We believe in all kinds of gods. So in like the Hindu religion, they have gods from every level, like
Yeah.
God of war,
Yeah.
God of love. They have different gods, and they just believe like, yeah, Jesus is a god. Why can't we celebrate him too? So they're like all inclusive, man. So when we went
Mm.
to they were the ones who invited us to sing Christmas carols in the hospital, and just their outlook was very similar to kind of like how my in-laws feel about it too. It's like, yeah, we're Christian, but we also believe in the old traditions as well. But again, there
So
are a lot of people who, yeah, sorry.
So it's in a way you're it's accommodating to worldviews, right? Or
Yes.
Well, it doesn't
perspectives.
really see it as separate, and that's one of the things. It sees it as part of the whole. And coming from the Episcopal or the Anglican tradition, one of the things is that it's not really a dogmatic church. What we do believe essentially is in the in the God's great love and in the power of the Christ to transform us, and we see that Christ manifested in Jesus Christ, in
Hmm.
Jesus. However, there's so many ways, so many aspects in which we don't understand fully about God, but we know that people have lived lives of deep faith and deep meaning for many years, and that people only seem to be stuck on the semantic ends of what it means to be connected to this great divine. So as human beings, yeah, we could say that my way is the right way, but yet we are so greatly diverse that we have to find what we have in common. And so
Hmm.
essentially to to practice some of the some of our indigenous rituals, it's really only an aspect of the whole. If as long as we don't see it as a dualism,
Hmm.
sometimes we get stuck in thinking,
Hmm.
oh, hey, there's one way, or and that's another way, and yet why can't there be more than one right answer? Well, maybe perhaps that's what we're really looking at is the wholeness of 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 existence, and that's a hard that's kind of like a big concept to try to grasp.
Yeah.
I don't expect everyone to buy into that. I don't expect everyone to say, yeah, that makes sense, but
Yeah.
I think that as we look at the wholeness of who we are, to me, the Christian faith is quite wonderful, and has taught me a lot about what's right in the world and what's life giving in the world.
Hmm.
And so I'm not going to lose that, but at the same time, I also know that there's many deep aspects of our indigenous culture and indigenous faith that whoa, there's a deep understanding of something that of my ancestors, of my connection, that is a spiritual thing. Spirituality is that connection to unconditional love. And if we could live into that more, well, yeah, I think the world would be a better place. It would heal us more too. But sometimes healing the divisions, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So uh, I would say that if you could find it as part of the whole, you'll probably find what's right about it. But if that's something you struggle with, then some people, as I know some people do, and they can only see it as one way.
Yeah.
Um, well, those are the choices that they make to live into the fullness of who they are. Um,
Yeah.
And they're
and that
losing something in that sense too,
I think
right?
so.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
so. I think you
Yeah,
definitely miss
because
out.
because my I have not seen these aunties in not since I left for Canada, and because of their hardened stance on something, they're like I'm
Mm,
gonna lose the experience with them. They're gonna lose the experience with me and whatnot, right? So
right.
like to me, like practically is just being hard headed. And then for me, if you want to talk about spirituality, you're just you're losing. It's a lose situation because at the end of the day, even you do take like a hard stance on something, you're still like you're still pushing people away. That kind of thing. That's the way I saw it. You're just pushing us away just because like for me
Mhm.
it was an important part of my trip because like it's something I get to experience authenticity being back home and whatnot, something that
Mm,
I
Right.
can't have
yeah.
here, right? Because it's back home, and yet they're trying to be like they're trying to move away from the traditions or whatever, which is to me is just like weird. Like what the hell? Like I'm out here living in Canada trying to preserve my culture, whereas over there you're trying to like ignore it, and it's just I don't know. To me, they like
Yeah.
I personally think it'd be an interesting like experience to like get to know them, to see their point of view. But to me, it's just kind of like it was just kind of whack. Like, what the hell? Why, man?
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
very dogmatic, like you
That's
said. It's just so weird.